And I think one of the things that makes this society as robust as it is, and really separates, in many ways, American society from other societies, is this amazing independent sector we have that is where a lot of the change, societal change, comes from, whether that's you know, the women's movement or the civil rights movement or the environmental movement or the gay, lesbian, bi movement, whatever the human right or environmental need demands. And I guess at one point, I don't know whether you brought it to us, Don, but Kenneth Boulding once said, you know, that the place that the big change in society is going to take place is at the intersection of those three. And we have a challenge right now in that we have a very clear pecking order of which of those domains is seen as being the most legitimate, which is the private sector. And I love the private sector. I didn't think I loved the private sector working with it because I thought the private sector was sort of antithetical to the kind of values that, you know, radicals out of the 70s, 60s, 70s had.
Yeah.
Yes. But the private sector adjusts quickly. It is, in many ways, much more nimble than a university, I'll tell you. If you consult to a university, you know, universities are like molasses. I mean, they're just, you know, kind of, the gears are grinding constantly. But I guess my point is that to recognize the importance of the independent sector, to stop this incessant beating up on the public sector, because my God, the public sector right now is trying to solve the most unbelievable problems, whether we're talking about global warming or societal equity or, you know, how we're going to live with each other or density. We've got to come to a whole new appreciation for the distinct, powerful roles of each of these sectors and how each one has to, where we need to build the talent, but also build the respect between the sectors, because it's too easy to fall back into, you know, the government is doing this, or the private sector is doing this, or what are those, you know, charity organizations doing?
Yeah. You know, this is really interesting. Thanks, Steve, for that perspective. Because most all of the work that I've been doing over the last 10 years, all three of those sectors that you're talking about, that you've described, the independent, the nonprofit, the private, and the governmental, they all come up in the work. They all are there. I mean, when you think about it, organizational policies, what are they based on? Social equity, right? A lot of it. A lot of the pressures that come from interest groups find their way into the private institutions, okay? The independent institutions themselves are impacted by government regulations and rules and constraints and private sector funding issues. I mean, when you look at it, you have all these interconnections. And so what I think what Bolden was talking about is that we're going to come to a point where all this has to come together or none of it's going to survive very well. I agree with you. I think we're getting very close to that point. And anyone in here, I don't care who you're working with or where you're working, has to deal with all three of those issues. Today. Very much so.
For every little piece of life.
Everything. Yeah, absolutely. That's very helpful. Thank you for that.
Let me just add one comment. I think that one of the things we really need to start thinking about is asking people to test their assumptions. And one of the assumptions is that one is good, the private sector, and that capitalism is automatically good because the only opposite is something horrible. And we've seemed to lose, in my opinion, have lost the middle ground. I really think that our ability to be critical thinkers has been used to become critics rather than critical thinkers. And so how can I be testing assumptions in a constructive way that includes people rather than labels people or judges people? And I think that on the whole, we've been in a judgment kind of modality recently, rather than trying to find what's right. I think, you know, the difference between either or and, you know, yes and, is really something that we need to be focusing on, whether you want to call it win-win, whether you want to call it whatever you would like to call it. But we really aren't thinking in those terms anymore. We're looking more at proving that we're right and someone else is wrong, or we're better, or something of that nature, and that concerns me.
It seems to me we've lost the ability to hold the duality or the intention in a positive manner, realizing we can't find answers on either end.
Or maybe it's because there's so much that's ambiguous, we don't want to have any ambiguity when we can resolve it by saying one's right and one's wrong. But maybe it's a stress issue, I don't know what it is, or information overload, but I really think that we need to start looking at finding ways to make multiple people successful, rather than proving that I'm right or you're wrong.
Holding the duality is hard work.
Yes, it is.
It's a lot easier to grab onto one end of the issue and say, okay, this is where
That's really,
there's that constant tension in trying to hold the duality.
let me just say one other thing. I think that we have to also recognize what technology is doing to pull us apart. I mean, we used to have a common thing. I mean, everybody would watch Laugh-In. We now have a channel that I can watch all the time with just my interest. And we don't have
That's
common...
Fox, right?
Pardon?
That's Fox, right?
Well, but it could be the food channel, it could be the travel channel, it could be any channel. I'm not talking about the political news, I'm just talking about my personal interest. And my world is getting narrow to just people who are like me, who like the things that I like. What are we doing to expand the world? And in terms of respecting someone else's point of view, I don't see that same level of effort. I mean, again, maybe this is an East Coast thing, on the West Coast it's all okay, but
Could you say a little bit more about that? What are the implications for the people here? Because I agree with you, but it seems to me that that needs to be part of our discussion and part of the work that we do. If I go into an organization, that has to be on the table somewhere along the line.
But is it on the table in the negative or in the positive? I guess is what I would say. One of the things that I would, Ron did a long time ago, he did a lot of studies because he was at the Institute for Studies at Ann Arbor. And he actually said the more we talk about the negative or the problems, the lower the energy goes in the organization. We all know that's why appreciative inquiry is so powerful. But I think the best way to get people to respect something is to show respect for their point of view. And I don't know that we always do that.
That's what I was suggesting, and so that seems to me that needs to be part of these kinds of programs, and that needs to be part of our profession.
Correct.
Is how do we do that? And maybe we need to learn how to do that. Maybe it's not that easy. I don't know.
Well, I think it's contagious, but I don't think it's easy.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, when I was at Weyerhaeuser, did his doctorate on supportive defensive behavior, and he basically reinforced just that concept, that if we are supportive, it tends to snowball supportively. If we get defensive, it snowballs defensively. So I agree with your point.
Well, this just struck me in this particular part of the conversation, when you talk about how do you really learn how to respect or listen to a view of the world that's different than yours, or a point of the world that's different than yours. And forgive me for those of you who weren't in the classroom today, because, but we were practicing this technique called triplet questioning, and some of you who've been through the program know, in which the very first question you ask when someone says something, that you follow up by a clarifying question that says, when you say X, what do you mean by that? And it seems to me that, it's a profoundly simple technique, and I use the word profound and simple together on purpose, because it forces, if that question is offered in the spirit of connecting, trying to connect with that which is most important to both of us, then it's offered in the spirit of trying to respecting where you're coming from. I genuinely want to know. And so I just wanted to call it out. It's something we've been practicing on all day, and I believe that that's a stepping stone that takes us in this direction.
If I could just put an overlay on that, or an underpinning, one or the other, or maybe both.
can
Let's
do
make a
Sandwich it.
sandwich.